At this point, we've built a nice terrain and scattered a bunch of rocks in the riverbed, and the river simulation comes closer to the end of the course, and it might be nice to have just a temporary water surface in there for now, just to have the scene a little bit more complete looking until we simulate this properly. So to build a temporary water surface, we're just going to start by object merging in the terrain. And then we can use a blast stop just to isolate the portion of the river that we want to use to build the water surface. So drop in a blast. We'll delete with a group based on the mask attribute being less than, you can try a value of 0.2. And we display that, and for this ad hoc group to work, we need to change the group type to points, because that's a point attribute. And this gives us a pretty decent region of the riverbed to use to build that water surface. Now to build a surface from this riverbed, we're just going to do a poly extrude and extrude this straight upwards. So on this poly extrude, you can turn on this extrude back option and turn on the transform extruded front, and we'll set the transform space to global so we can just do an explicit extrusion in the Y direction, and I'll just extrude this upwards 20 units. And you don't need to be very exact about how much you're extruding this upwards, because we're going to do another process to use a Boolean to define the water height that we actually want. So let's drop in a bound and attach this portion of the riverbed into this bound here. And I'll put on the template display on that bound. And we can use the padding controls to define what we want this water height to be. So on this upper padding, we can just reduce the Y component until we get to a height that looks like it'll be pretty good for that riverbed. Let's try this height and see how that works. And then we can just do a Boolean operation to find the intersection between this bounding box with the upper padding set and this extruded region. So just drop in a Boolean, and we can use the Boolean intersect preset option here, attach our poly extrude and our bound. We don't really need to change any settings on this Boolean since we chose the Boolean intersect option specifically. But of course if you use a regular Boolean, just make sure you set the operation accordingly. And yeah, now we've got a pretty cool little water surface. And this is really fast to process, but it's still a good idea to cache these things out so you don't have to recook lots of things every time you open your Houdini scene. So as usual, that's going to just be a single frame cache. And for display purposes, we can just set some color on this and a lower alpha value. So you can color this however you want. I'll just make this a bit bluish. And then we can define an alpha value. In this case, I'll just use the attribute create, set the name to be alpha, and then we'll set a value of 0.5 to make this halfway transparent. And as always, drop a null at the end for the out water temp. And one thing to watch out for is that you have to use this alpha attribute with a capital A. If you use a lowercase a, it won't work because Houdini is expecting this very specific attribute name. So yep, just make sure to watch out for that. And this temp water here will be a nice little addition to our environment so that we don't have to wait till the end of the class to see a representation of that water.